On this episode of Still Loading, it's 2022 in review. Hello, everybody, and welcome to 2023. It's the first episode of the Still Loading podcast in the new year. I am your host, Josh Koval. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. And as usual, as we end every year and begin every year with a retrospective, I am, of course, joined by my brother from the Great White North, the Canadian legend himself. And if the legends are true, if the legends that we hear swirling down here in the States are true, my buddy TJ Hodder of the Hodder Show, he is the only man to ever climb the CN Tower with the Canadian flag draped on his back, sewn with the hockey sweaters of every team he does not watch because he is one of the few Canadian. He's so Canadian, he doesn't give a shit about hockey. And he parasails, he hang glides all 2,747 kilometers to Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, because that's the most goddamn Canadian thing I can think of. Now, that's kilometers by driving, so it's actually a little bit shorter of a distance, but nonetheless, he is the only man, nay, superhuman, to ever conquer such a feat. I am joined, of course, to review our 2022 year-end retrospective with TJ from the Hodder Show. TJ, my friend, you Canadian son of a bitch, how are you doing?
Buddy, it is so good to see you, and I don't even want to say you are too kind and you are too much, man. I love it. That's
I forgot. I was going to say you had Timbits in hand.
I do usually have Timbits in my hand, so that's.
I
look forward to this every year,
a couple
man.
A's in there too. If I really go in for the full Canadian stereotype,
a couple of boots.
Yeah, right. Oh my god, dude, it is. Oh man, it's great to have you back on the show. The yearly visit of TJ Claus on right around Christmas time.
TJ Claus, yeah, I'm like Santa. I only come around the holidays, and I show up, and I'm jolly and have a beard, and there's more of me to love, and I try to spread good cheer and toys from my sack, I guess. Let's just move on with that thought.
Did you think that last sentence through?
Yeah, I did. That's why I said it.
Oh God, I feel so bad for. Actually, you know what? It's going to tie in. You know what? Fuck it. I feel bad for your wife. That's one of the big news that we're going to talk about for our year-end review. I feel so bad for your wife that she.
What kind of suck do you think I'm talking about? God, come on, man. This is a show for children.
I mark this as explicit. No children should listen to this.
Oh, shit. Okay, no, I'm kidding.
No. Oh, my God. But yeah, we're here to talk about our 2022 in review. As we do every year, TJ and I break down our respective shows. Just kind of like, it's one of the few times in the year, like we kind of give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back. We try not to go too crazy because both of us, we don't like other shows that are like, constantly shouting out their own achievements and shit like that. But you know what, at least once a year we should look back and just see what we were able to accomplish over this last year. So TJ, to kick things off, what did you accomplish with the Hodder Show this year? This was a big year for you. There was a ton of stuff going on.
Well, I want to say one thing before I dive in here. I think it is very important to always appreciate the things that you accomplish and be proud of it and be prideful of it. But you always have to stay humble and kind. That's the whole point of it. So you want to...
Yeah, I'm with you.
You want to... I mean, I was quoting a Tim McGraw song, but that's beside the point. You want to...
That went way over my head.
Yeah, that's okay. You want to be appreciative of the things that you've done. And I know for a fact that we both have had, really exciting years, and a lot of really good things have happened So it's really fun that we're doing this, because usually when we do these, as we've spoken about in the past, I've been kind of disenfranchised with podcasting, which is I
Yeah.
always get this way around the holidays. I'm not sure why. I'm not this year, which is great. And it's not that I'm not still enjoying it. I love the content I put out at Christmas, especially last year. Like I like to do horror content around the holidays. I like ghost stories at Christmas. It's one of my favorite traditions. So I don't know why I was so disenfranchised last year. I had a great, but anyway, that's beside the point.
Yeah.
But what's great is this year I'm all excited and hyped up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I think it's just because I look so forward to doing these with you now. That like I just get excited, because I'm like, this is the only time we really get to have a conversation until you finally do a review of Aiden Chronicles: The First Mage. Until that happens, I can't be of any help to you. But
I'll get to it eventually. I'll get to it's just
he's been saying
I actually
that
did
for
try to play it
years.
earlier this year. I actually did try to play it earlier this year. And I gotta tell you, TJ, it's not looking promising for our episode. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I'll get to it though.
Let's just get drunk and then we'll talk about it.
Dude, maybe if I can convince my wife to watch the kid for a week, I'll just drive up to Toronto and we can meet up and just
I like how you just say Toronto. I don't live in Toronto, but that's okay.
Well, that's the area. I'm not trying to give a specific.
Yeah, close enough.
Specific. I know it's the Toronto area, right? Like you're.
I'm actually technically outside of Toronto now.
But it's how like would you like an hour or two?
I'm about 2.5, 3 hours away from
Toronto. Wow, it's even okay.
So it's considered. I'm not tech. I guess you could say I'm technically considered GTA. I don't really consider myself GTA, but I live in a town called Peterborough, which is I'm about 2.5 hours northeast of Toronto. But anyway, that's completely beside the point.
Anyway, but yeah, no, I'll just have to make a trek up. I'll actually make an exception and drink, because I'm not a big drinker, but I'll make an exception while I'm in Canada, and we can burn our way through Aiden Chronicles: The First Mage.
That would be literally like the best, because I think you would enjoy the game more if you could play it with me, because it is one of those games that it starts off very, very, very slow.
Yes.
But then it gets a lot more less slow. But it's still
slow,
pretty slow.
But not as slow.
But I think it's just a nostalgia thing. But anyway, that's I'm getting off track here, as I tend to do. But you asked me about my year.
I did.
And then I'm going to turn around and ask you about your year. But overall, for me, it was a year of realizing some things that I've been working at basically since I started podcasting, and reaching a couple of goals that I didn't know I had when I started this year off. Heading into this year, my goal was very simple. I just wanted to keep going.
Yeah.
There's going to be a central theme for a lot of my stuff. Like we'll get into nitty-gritty details in that, but starting off this year, and this is something I've talked a little bit about, but not a lot. At the start of this year, I was in what was at one point my podcast room, and I just cleared it out fully. And I was going to build it into like my little podcast room.
Yeah.
And I was looking at this empty room, and I'm looking around, and I was literally like sitting on the floor with a beer. And I was just thinking about the show and thinking about podcasting and stuff. And I said, I've been working at this basically every day, really, in some way, shape, or form, for the last, it'll be 6 years. In February of this year, it was 6 years. And I was like, there's been some great things that have happened. And this show has provided so much joy for me, and, so many great things. I've met so many wonderful people like yourself. And I'm like, it's been great, but I'm like, I've kind of plateaued the last couple of years. I didn't go down, I didn't go up, and nothing really changed. I didn't really get a new following. I didn't really, my Patreon didn't grow. Like nothing really was going on.
Yeah.
And I was kind of throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall to see what would stick. And I kind of just made a promise to myself. I was like, you know what? I don't want this to become a chore. And I said, I feel like internally, I was like, if I keep going at this rate, putting in the work that I am, and I don't want to be famous or anything. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. I was like, I need something. I need something that says, hey, like this is still a good thing for you. I needed something. And I said to myself, I said, you know what? Out of respect for myself and the podcasting game that I love so much and the Hodder show, if I get to the end of this year and I'm in the exact same spot that I have been the last 2 years, I think I'm going to respectfully bow out from the Hodder show. I think that this was going to be my last year of podcasting full time.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not trying to start off on a sour note, guys. This is leading somewhere. So to start out with this mindset, it was a bittersweet thing, but it was also like it kind of rejuvenated me because I was like, okay, I'm giving myself one more year to really get something.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that was, but I was like, I need something. I need something I can grab onto and be like, fuck yeah. Like I was just like, I need something.
You need some sign that your work is actually getting, not
Mhm.
like you said, you don't care about being famous, but it's like you it's that it's that like that balancing act that podcast content creators, not just podcasters, always balance, where it's like
Mhm.
you like what you do, you don't need or want to be famous because of it, but if you're also not getting any positive feedback from it, whether it's positive, it could be something simple as someone just messaging you saying, I liked your episode this week. And a stranger, like, no offense to the current listeners or anything like that, but like just someone like that you weren't expecting, or no, it doesn't have to be a stranger. It could be a current listener. What the hell am I saying? Just anybody. Because if you don't see that, or if you don't see some type of growth, whether in interaction or numbers or recognition from peers, even, then it's not that it's you still don't enjoy doing it, but it's harder to justify spending what free time you have on something that isn't necessarily giving you any fulfillment. Like it like podcasting itself is fulfilling, but the amount of work that goes into it isn't always like I know so many people who will guest on a ton of shows because it's not running a show. Like former podcasters who now don't want to do it anymore, don't want the grind anymore, but they will still guest on shows because they love podcasting. They just aren't in love with the whole process of doing it all themselves. So I totally understand what you mean. Where like you were stagnant, like you were putting in all this work and you saw nothing in return. Um, or you shouldn't say nothing, but you didn't see any growth for the extra work you were doing.
Right. And that's what it was. It was, I was like, I don't think I want to see downloads numbers. Like I was like, I don't think that's what I want and that's what I need. Because when I had that, it was really cool, but I wasn't like sitting in front of the computer tearing up over it. You know what I mean? I was
Yeah.
like, I want something that makes me be like, this is validation. And I didn't know what that was. So heading into this year, I had a fire under my ass as far as I was like, you know what? A lot of people have said to me, a lot of my peers, hey, like you're good at this. And a lot of bands have said to me after I've spoken to them, or people in general, like, wow, like you're a really great interviewer and like you're so easy to talk. And I was like, okay, if I'm all these things, let me have the best year I've ever had. Let me sit down and make every episode that I do that is a brand new episode of the Hodder Show the best that I can. I
Hmm.
don't want to have any episodes this year that I look back and go, that episode could have been better. And that was my mindset heading in this year because I said, if this is going to be my last year of podcasting full time, let me step back too. I was thinking when I say that I was going to bow out with the Hodder Show, I was probably going to go into 2023. Like that was my plan. I was probably going to go with like episode 400 and then bow out. Like
I
it
getcha.
was going to be my last year full time podcasting. And maybe try something else was my point, and I didn't know what it was that I was looking for, but I was like, if this is gonna be my last year podcasting full time, I want to look back on this year and be like, dude, you had an amazing year and you're fulfilled. And if this is the last year full time for you, it's the legacy, I think, more than anything, right? I want to look back on this year and be like, I'm proud of that as my last full time year of podcasting. And also, I was getting married. So I was like, I need to make sure this year, on top of this happening, I'm putting the effort I need to into that and into preparing for the wedding, and work was crazy and all that stuff. So in a lot of ways, the show still took a bit of a back burner this year. And even though that happened, a couple of really amazing things still did happen that I'm going to talk about, but I've rambled on long enough because I think that the listeners of the Still Loading podcast and the Hodder Show are very curious. Overall, for you, Josh, how was your year?
Well, before I get into that, just real quick, the vibe, because you kind of danced around a little bit. I understand we're gonna go into specifics later, but you kind of painted this picture of like you were ready to bow out after this year. But my understanding is it was a damn good year for the Hodder Show, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I feel like for me, yes, overall, folks, I had the best year of podcasting I've ever had. Like, hands
you
down.
had this like 15 minutes of buildup, and then you didn't even say what. I was like, I'm talking too much. Podcast host, and I'm just fucking with you.
And I'm great, and then I'm going to turn things over to all that build up for nothing. Yeah, no, for the record, folks, has actually been a great year overall. Like, the Hodder Show, it's been the best year of my life as far as podcasting is concerned, and also just my life in general for a reason. But I'll get into that all in a little bit here, because I want to hear about Josh's year, because I know you also had just a killer freaking year.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been a damn good year for my show as well. It's funny because we talked about it a bit off mic about how whenever we record these, this is always at your low point for the year, like emotionally. But I can tell just from you talking about it, and both on mic and off mic, about how much of a difference this year has been, excuse me, compared to last year. You know, it just is. It's night and day. You are so much happier, like still busy, and obviously it's a crazy time of year, but I can see it on your face. There's a much less weight on your shoulders dealing with everything. So
yeah, that's what I think it is. See that. Yeah, man, and I appreciate that. And I know you're someone who, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, when the big thing happened, there was for 4 people I contacted right away, and you were one of them.
Well, I'm honored.
The first one being my wife, obviously, and then from there.
I'm now not honored. Why am I less important than your wife?
Why did you not message? Actually, truth be told, I might have Snapchatted you first. Actually, now I'm thinking about it. Don't tell her I said that.
She doesn't listen to this, right? It's fine.
She doesn't listen to the show. It's fine. But anyway,
no,
I appreciate you saying that, man.
For my show, it's been a good year, and I was thinking about this earlier this year. 2020 into 2022, like there's been a build up over the last 3 years to what this past year has been. 2020, I feel like, was the year I really got my shit together as a podcaster. Like, I really started to understand a little bit more of the weekly grind, because up until then I was doing every other week. And originally that was just because I didn't understand how to plan content. That is the hardest thing to do as a solo podcaster. If you're not like a news show that just finds topics throughout the week, and you kind of do what I do, which is like individual game retrospectives and interviews and other shit like that, it's hard to come up with topics sometimes. So I was able to finally figure out, like, oh, I don't have to do this like at the same time. So I finally got ahead of schedule, and I finally started recording like weeks in advance, so that way I could plan around if things fall through. I can find fallback plans. Gives me time to edit, so I'm not just rushing through editing. That's also a positive of it. But 2020 was really me learning that. And then 2021 was kind of like, I call it a little bit of a lost year. It was still a good year for the show. I still enjoyed everything. Oh, and 2020 was also the year I started getting interviews like with people in the industry, which is just surreal still to me. But 2021 was me kind of, yeah, I became a father in 2021. It was relearning how to organize my show now that I have to take care of this infant, this child, and try to find time to be a good parent while also doing something that I love. And I've been able to find that balance so far. We'll see as my daughter gets older how that schedule is going to change, which I'm assuming it will. But as of now, I'm very lucky with the schedule I have with her. Um, and so 2021 was just me trying to understand how to podcast while being a dad, while working full time. And also just kind of, I did scale the podcast back a little bit. For the first couple months, I only did bi-weekly because that was when my daughter was born. And then for the for the next couple months after that, I did two full lengths and two mini episodes. So the mini episodes almost always turned into full lengths anyway. They were almost always an hour and 10 to hour and a half. But some of the minis were the Captain and the Game Master series, where me and my friend Dexter have been rewatching the show for the podcast. And I that was important though because it took one mental decision off of my plate. I no longer had to figure out like, all right, what are my four episodes this month, 4 to 5, depending on how many Sundays are in the month. And I'm like, I got to figure it out. But that by having Captain N already on the docket makes it so much easier. That's 1/4 of most months just already known. I don't have to think about it. And with I did the History of RTS series, which was like a scripted, more historical look at like different games in the RTS genre of video games, or real time strategy for those who don't know what that stands for. Um, that was also helpful. But last year was all a setup for what this year was. And last year, it really kind of primed everything to, I don't want to say explode, because this was a very good year for me, both in terms of download numbers, also in terms of meeting amazing people, in like people that I really respect in the retro gaming community and the gaming community at large. And in the podcasting sphere, I met some amazing podcasters through the show this year. And it like, so 2021 really set up this year in 2022, where I got to meet so many amazing people. My listenership grew, which is just fantastic. And then also I got more interactivity. More importantly, I got more interaction from all of you, the listeners. Like I felt like more people enjoyed what I was doing this year than in previous years. And that sincerely means the world to me, because as we alluded to with you, TJ, with you're talking about like you wanted to see growth this year. That's kind of what we thrive off of. Doesn't mean it's necessarily it'll ever stop us, like depending on the circumstances. But I mentioned it in a bonus episode of on my Patreon. Um, and I'm going to say it again here. And I actually talked to this person and said it made him cry. So patron, you know who you are. I still don't know if you want me to say your name, so I'm gonna keep it at keep it nameless right now. But he was my first patron. Like I had a friend who was a patron who was giving $1 a month, and it's someone that I knew. He was being nice. He doesn't listen to my stuff. He just wanted to support me, and that sincerely meant the world too, because that's a true friend. Someone who's, even though it's just $1, he's not getting anything out of it. He just wants to support a friend, and that's fucking fantastic. And then this patron joined at like the $5 level of my Patreon, and I had fucking nothing at on my Patreon. Absolutely nothing. And I saw that all of a sudden I'm like, I had a $5 patron. I'm like, what the hell? Who would do this? Like I kept promising for years, like, oh, I'll figure something out. And I'm like, oh shit, someone subscribed to my Patreon.
The audacity.
I was like, oh shit, I got to actually do something now. And it started late last year. This happened late last year. But because of that one patron, because that one guy supported me, and sincerely, thank you again, man. Like I know you listened to the bonus episode and you're going to listen to this, but and listeners out there, I'm not saying that you need to do this to my show, for TJ's show, for any podcaster show. I understand, like, you don't have to give your money to us. We do this because we love to do it, and we enjoy that you enjoy it. But giving any words of encouragement, it means the entire world to us. And that's what I really felt like I got this year more than anything. That's why this year was so successful in my eyes, because my Patreon did grow, which really shows that, I mean, that means a lot, not because of the money. The money, I'm not making a lot off my Patreon. If you're very curious listeners, you can go to it and see I make $18 a month. That's not me complaining. But when I look at that $18, I'm like, there's people who like me enough to give me money for stuff that I do. Like, that's who like the content that I like. It blows my fucking mind, because it doesn't make any sense to me.
It's a
I,
wild thing, man. It really
it is.
is.
And it and just to be clear, I'm really trying to be sincere when I say it doesn't, like, you don't have to show your you don't have to, if you like what I do, or you like what TJ does, or any podcaster for that matter, you don't have to give to their Patreon to show your gratitude for that, or to show tell them that you enjoy it. You can just send them a message. That means the world to us, because it's that's the stuff that fuels me. So because of that one patron, my Patreon this year fucking exploded. I'm not talking monetarily. I'm talking about the stuff I made for it. I'm doing stuff at the $5 tier for 2 patrons, and I'm putting in their 3-hour long episodes. Not 3 different episodes, like one episode that is 3 hours long that I record monthly, the Still Bonding show that I now have 4 episodes out. Um, that takes a lot of time to edit a 3-hour episode and to record a 3-hour episode. And I'm doing that because I want to give something to the people at the $5 level, most importantly, but also because I find, like, that encouragement convinced me, like, fuck it, I'm going to do this. Even if only 2 people listen to it, those are the people who are, like, really, like, they're supporting me, whether it's monetarily or otherwise. And that means the world to me. So, like, I don't know. I'm very worried about coming off as like, focusing too much on the monetary aspect. This year it just felt like more people expressed to me how much they liked the show, and that my gratitude I don't have enough gratitude to give for that. Like, that's why this year was successful for me, to me, because more people have reached out to me, and I've gotten more positive feedback than I ever have. And that really, truly means the world to me. So that was a very long winded explanation, or a long winded overview of 2022, with a few specifics thrown in here and there. But, yeah, my 2022 has been great, for the show, and on a personal level. Like, I mean, it was a tough year for my wife and I, just because it was a lot of stuff going on personal stuff I don't want to go into on the podcast. But her and I are still doing well. My daughter is doing well. So both on a personal and, actually professional level, and on a podcasting level, it's been a damn fucking good year. So, yeah, 2022, fantastic so far. But now I think it's a good time for us to dive into kind of some of the specifics of, like, the highlights from this year. So TJ, what were some of your favorite moments from your show in 2022? Like, what were some of your favorite uh, episodes, or maybe even experiences outside of the podcast? Actually, there's a couple big experiences directly with the podcast that isn't necessarily an episode related topic,
Yeah.
but go off. What do you
So
got?
there are 4 things I have to touch on, folks, and I apologize, because as you may know, if you are regular listeners of the Still Loading podcast and you listen to me anytime I come on here, which I'm always honored to come on the Still Loading podcast, or if you listen to my show, the Hodder Show, which you're
And
also
I
doing this on.
am honored when I'm on the Hodder Show, because this is
Always.
also going to be, this is a crossover episode,
The
so it's going up on
crossover.
both
The
feeds.
biggest crossover since The Simpsons and Family Guy. Let's be serious. It's bigger than that. But I like to talk, and I say a lot of words that may or may not have a point. But what I was getting at earlier was I needed something. And there are 3 things that happened this year and relates to the podcast. One of which really that gave me that this is what I needed to keep me going. And then another big thing happened that gave me that same thing. So I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. I can't now. I feel like I'm like, I asked for a sign from the universe and the universe gave one. So is what it is. But the biggest thing that happened to me this year is I got married.
Woo!
Y'all can't see, but I'm wearing my ring.
I can't
Very
yell
good.
louder because my kid's asleep, but woo!
And I'm extremely happy about that. Sam, I love you very much. And we've been together for 10 years. She's been through this whole podcast journey with me, and she's always been supportive and everything. And it was a wonderful day, obviously, wasn't without its hitches. But that's how it should be, I think, but that was wonderful. And just, I had an episode that I'm going to talk about a little later on in the podcast. We talk about our favorite episodes, but I had an episode that was actually my bachelor party. It was me
I listened
recording
to
a
that
podcast.
one. That was fun.
Yes, and I'll get into that in a little bit, because there's a couple of specific things I need to talk about with that. But overall, the podcast kind of took a bit of like I was saying, a bit of a backseat to the wedding stuff. But it was still on top of that. In the beginning of this year, well, it was kind of late last year heading into this year, I downloaded Discord, which I'd never used before, and joined a Discord for a podcast that I have spoken at large about so much, called The Grey Rooms. It is my favorite audio horror fiction podcast. And I joined that Discord. And that evening I was on stream with the creator while he was like editing and stuff. And I was like, what is happening? Like, oh my God, this is amazing. Because I'm such a fan, right?
Yeah.
And then, an hour later, I'm literally talking to him while he's gaming, and we're like having a conversation. I was like, oh my God, 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 oh my God. So it was this huge thing. And then obviously he heard me talking, and he was like, what's going on over there? You got a crisp sounding setup there, my guy. What's going on? So that led to him being on my show, Jason Wilson from the Grey Rooms. And after we were done talking, he said to me, he says, man, we were both drunk, by the way. He said, man, you got to get the Patreon going again. What are you doing? Because he was a big Patreon guy. And I just said, oh man, like no one, I have had a maximum of 2 patrons for the last 7 years, and humongous shouts to my boy Scott, who has been a patron from day one, much like your friend. He joined at my $5 tier, doesn't really listen to the show. Like, podcasts aren't really his thing. He just wanted to support. And I'm like, dude, like, it's just big shouts to my boy Scott. But I had done some things for the Patreon, but then I just stopped, and I was like, I kept canceling it. And he was like, dude, just do it. Like, just do it and you'll figure something out. So the Grey Rooms community right away was and really still is, a super positive place. And I met some amazing people there. And what happened as the year progressed, there are 2 major things that all comes back to the Grey Rooms. So this is why I'm starting with this. I started to get a little bit of a nudge. Nothing crazy. It was just like, hey man, like Jason would say, oh hey, like you should do this, or hey, maybe try this, or people from his team would give me advice on things.
Yeah.
And I'd kind of be like, okay, and I started feeling really good about what I was doing. And he always spoke very highly of me and my show and my history, which they would always say, like, oh, like your history and what you've done. And like, it's like, dude, you should be proud of that. Like, that's worth something. And it started to really make me be like, yeah, I should be proud of that. Like,
100%.
That's worth something. And fast forward a few months to, I think it was July or August, whatever, it doesn't matter. Sometime in the summer, they had a network, and they were looking for shows for their network. And randomly, Jason had said, "Hey, I want to have a meeting with you," and then their podcast director, Sarah Cassie. And I was kind of like, "Oh, okay, like, sure, you know." I thought maybe they wanted to pick my brain about something. I
Yeah.
didn't. I thought maybe they were going to ask me to help out with production, something of that nature.
Mhm.
So I went into that meeting thinking something was going to happen in that regard. And what ended up happening was they basically we started off the meeting, and they just started saying really nice things about me and my show, and they offered me a spot on their network, which is a Spreaker network, which is directly associated with iHeartRadio.
Yeah.
So what they were offering me was an opportunity to have real ad revenue on a major platform and the support of the network crew, and just kind of help push me in that way.
Yeah.
There was no catch, there's no anything. It's just, hey, you have value in what you have done, and someone needs to give you a fucking break. And obviously, I'm paraphrasing and saying this, but he was like, he says, it makes me angry that you are not bigger than you are. Because he says, I see how much fucking work you put into this and how much you bleed for this. And you need a shot. He's like, I'm in this position where here, I can give this to you. You fucking earned this, and you're gonna keep earning this. I
That's
know you
awesome,
are.
man. That's so
And
cool.
dude, I am so glad we were not on video, because they're saying this to me, and I'm like,
Put yourself on mute, start bawling.
bro, I'm probably gonna start crying right now, to be honest with you. The last 6 years, all this work, that was the moment. That was the opportunity. Here's this opportunity. You have worked your ass off for it. You deserve this. Here you go. You still
That's
got to put in the
amazing.
fucking work, but
Yeah.
here's this opportunity. And it was a lot because I wasn't expecting that.
Mhm.
And my show didn't make sense to be on their network per se,
'Cause they're a
because it
horror
was,
fiction like, network, and your
yeah.
show doesn't really necessarily. I know you have those elements to your
Mhm.
show, and you've increased those elements over the
Yes.
year, but at that time, it was mostly just an interview show.
So they had themselves, obviously, they had a great show called The Ghost Signal. Then they had other fiction-y type podcasts. And then my dumbass. So I was kind of like, does this make sense? Like, are you sure? Like, and it was just like, dude, like, yeah. Like, and it was that validation. And I'm not sure still to this day if they realize how much validation that gave me.
It
Everything
means a
else
lot.
aside,
Yeah.
hearing someone I respect so much, as with Jason, say those things to me, I was like, that's all, that's what I needed, honest to God. And a lot of things happened. I switched over to Spreaker. Spreaker has been great. Um, I kind of have to say this part. Unfortunately, as these things happen in life, you get the good with the bad. Um, the Grey Rooms productions, the Grey Rooms show itself is on an indefinite hiatus. I hope it comes back, because as a fan, I love it. The Grey Rooms network is kind of shuffling, rebranding. I am still a part of it, and we will be doing something. There's some cool stuff coming, so stay tuned for that.
I can't wait to hear
But
it.
the point of it is that that opportunity was it meant, and I don't know if I'm getting across how much it meant to me, guys, but that, like, I there was this video I took right after because I wanted to send it to Sam. There was this 5-minute video I took. And like, I'm like literally like trying to stop myself from crying because I'm like,
Yeah.
it was like this weight was just lifted off my shoulders. Just be like, hey, yeah, you got it, man. Like, that's the thing. That's
You know
what I
what?
needed.
You know what I'm thinking? Like, I think what you just said there, I think crystallizes what I was saying earlier about, the people who subscribe to podcasters or content creators on Patreon or give them nice comments. It's not the nice comments, it's not the money. While that all is extremely,
Mhm.
like, the comments more so, while that's all extremely like valued and you're flattered by it, it gives you the validation you're looking for. The fact that
Yes.
I'm not wasting my time with this. Like, this actually means something to even one person, to just one person, that this means something to them. And I can totally understand. Like, I could think of like a podcast that like is my dream podcast to guest on, which I don't want to say it on here. I listeners long time could honestly probably guess what it is. If I ever got that validation from them, I'd lose my fucking mind. Like, I don't know how I'd react to it. So I can only imagine how good that had felt. That's amazing, dude. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you, man. And like I said, straight up, there was 4 people I messaged about that. There was the wife. There was my old producer. My guy Jason does all my graphic stuff and has talked me off the ledge more times than I can count with the show. And then you. Like, I literally was like, okay, I don't want to start telling people immediately because, I was like, is this real? Like, but I was like, I got to tell these people and I've got to tell Josh because he'll know. I was like, you will appreciate why I am so like
That means a
over the
lot.
moon
Thank you,
about
man.
this. And yeah, it was and still is, even though things kind of maybe didn't go the way that I had hoped. It's still what I got from it I'm still riding that high, even though things kind of, I'm still riding that high because it's like, how can I not?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And what happened in that same breath was then with Jason's pushing, I restarted my Patreon. He joined my Patreon, which is very gracious of him. This is before I was on the network, and kind of gave me some promotion within the community. I got to know some people in the community, and before I knew it, my Patreon went from a solid 2 to 12,
That's
and
awesome.
that's where I'm sitting right now. And I made my own Discord kind of as a joke at first, but it has grown into,
You really like Discord, man.
yeah,
I can see it.
dude, I love it because it is instant. I
Mhm.
have friends on there that also happen to be fans of the podcast. I can get in direct contact with them easily. I'm going to go live when we're done here and have a couple of drinks with them. Like, I have so
I
much
might just
fucking
join in
fun.
afterwards
You
anyway because
should.
I can sleep in tomorrow.
You're damn right. I was going to say, I know you can sleep in the more, bro. You better come out. But so it is this wonderful thing. And I don't know if they realize, and I've tried really hard to express this to them multiple times, but the people who are on my Patreon and on my Discord, I consider those people my core fans. And the reason I say that is there are people on my Discord who are not patrons, by the way. They're the ones I hear from directly, constantly. Hey, I liked the episode, blah, blah, blah. Hey, if there's any feedback, I can get it directly from them.
Mhm.
You don't always get that. It's almost like you're yelling into the void and hoping people like it. You know what I mean? I know
Yeah,
you
I get you.
get
Oh, no,
that.
I totally understand you.
So to have that from them it's amazing. And the whole Patreon thing is like, I was not ready for my Patreon to blow up like that. Much like you were saying, I can relate, dude. I went from when I hit a certain goal, I think it was $30 a month, I was going to do something. I didn't know what. And I was like, yep. And then I hit 3 patrons. And I was like, oh, I better get on it. And then I hit like 5 and I was like, oh,
I really got to get on it.
dude, in like a span of like 2 months, I went from like 2 patrons to like 10. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? Actually, no, I think it was 7. And then
Even
it jumped
so.
up from there. Still, I was like, oh shit. So I was scrambling to try and figure something out. And this leads into another kind of all in that same vein. And I give shout outs to my patrons at the end of every single episode. So you guys will hear that all later. But humongous shout outs to all of my Patreon family. I
should
love
really
you guys.
do that for mine.
I mean, no. I just like to do that. But they know how much I appreciate them. And I hope I always get that point across, folks. But something that I did do, you spoke about launching a podcast. I was going to launch 2 podcasts, and the one didn't work out, thank God, because the amount of work it would have been is insane. But I hemmed and hawed about what I was going to do, and I was going to do this clip show type thing, which was the 1 episode, and I was going to have someone else host it. It was going to be like cut stuff from the show that didn't make air for whatever reason that I thought was still funny. Blooper, basically like almost like a quick 5-minute mini episode of a podcast that was like blooper reels or like an episode of me burping, like, it's just stupid shit.
Yeah.
But it was going to be hosted by someone else, so it would have been fun that way. And then I was going to do like I think I was going to call it like Let's Have a Beer or something. And it was just me basically hanging out with a guest having a beer. And I was like, well, I basically and it just hit me one night. I announced it on a live stream, and the response was not underwhelming, but it was kind of like, I was looking at it and I was like, I've fucking done this all before. Like, I got to do something different. And it kind of just hit me where I was like, well, fuck, man. I really, really love horror narration. Maybe there's something there. So then it kind of just fell into my lap with the tapes of trepidation, because I couldn't come up with a better name. And
it's a good name.
And I wanted something unique and different that made you go, huh? What is that? TOT, bro. And I came up with this concept. I'm not going to go into it, folks. But all you need to know is at least once a month or 4 or 5 times a month, depending on how I'm feeling, I drop an episode of this horror narration podcast that is me narrating either stories that I've written for my horror thing, which I'm not going to talk about, or stories from the internet, Reddit, creepypastas, things of that nature, or even urban legends. And when I say I have fun with it, I cannot express to you all how much fun I have with it. And I have had people guest on it. Some of my patrons have been guests on it. And it is just a blast. And it really, I have always had a dream to do some kind of voice acting of some kind, but I never thought I had it in me, really. Doing stuff on the Hodder Show was always fun. Doing tapes of trepidation really kind of put it into full gear for me. And I was like, you know what? Other people can do it. Why can't I? And I started doing it. I got some really great feedback. And then now I've been a actual voice actor on a couple podcast episodes for other people.
That's awesome.
That's something heading into the new year. There's one particular episode of a podcast called Baseline Feed. I cannot wait for it to come out, and I'm terrified for it to come out as well, because I am fully like playing not like a creepy character or like a one-liner or anything. It's like me and another person are the only people you're going to hear.
Oh, wow.
And this person I'm going to be working with, she is a fucking professional, and I'm me. And the producer is he messaged me and he goes, dude, I just heard your the whole episode. And I was like, oh God. And he was like, you nailed it. Like, he's like, I cannot believe how awesome you did. And I was like, oh, because it's not a character I would ever cast myself as.
Yeah.
Let's just say it's almost like a romantic co-lead.
Ooh.
And
Does
I'm
your
like,
wife know about this? Does your wife know about
she
this?
may or may not know about it. But she was my inspiration, actually. I was actually looking at this picture that I have over here of us while I was doing the read. I'm going to show Josh. You can't see it, but what does this say? Loved you yesterday. Love you still. Always have, always will. And that's a picture of us. Yay. And I had to get in this character, and I was having a really hard time with it. So I just started thinking, okay, I'm going to talk to this person who I hadn't heard her lines yet. I'm going to talk to this mystery person as if it's Sam. And I'm going to read her line as she would internally and then respond how I would to her. Obviously, loving it up a little bit. You know, it's not like every time Sam speaks to me, I'm like, yeah, babe, whatever you want to do, baby. Yeah, you know, okay. Like, you know, we've been together for over 10 years. We're married. I'm not always going to talk to her like that. You know, that's not reality. But I'm very excited about that. I'm terrified. I got a lot of feelings about it. That's something that I think in 2023 you're going to see my ass do a lot more of, because it's just too much fun. Taped Trepidation has been a blast. It's going to be, I have all of 2023 planned for it. For the first time ever, I have a podcast that's fully planned out for a year. My boy Josh is going to be making an appearance as well. I actually just finished editing the episode he's going to be on. I don't know when I'm going to be dropping it, but I'm very excited because I never thought I'd hear Josh say certain things that he's saying, because if it's a narration read, so it's not like he's playing a character, but like kind of is.
I didn't have to do like any acting,
but like it's. I never thought I would hear you say certain things that horror based sentences, not like just really obscene stuff. It's just certain things. I'm like, it's odd hearing Josh say this. I love it. Like, oh my God, it's so fun. So
he put his dilly dally in her Sally whacker.
Yeah.
Terms like that, right? Yeah. That's exactly what was in the script.
No. It's like
that's as racy as it gets here on the Still Loading podcast.
You know? Yeah.
So
yeah,
racy.
We get a little hardcore there, brother, over on the Taped Trepidation. But overall, it's just, this year has been the best in my life. And for the podcast, it's been the best year I've ever had. And I feel validated. I feel rejuvenated, and just I'm more excited heading into 2023 for content than I have been probably in the last 5 years. Not that I wasn't excited, but it's like a new level, because I'm in this interesting position where I don't have any idea what the future is going to hold. But either way, I'm really excited. And I'm just like, bring it on. And yeah, that's kind of my spiel about some moments I had to talk about.
What I like about these episodes are year-end retrospectives. And I said it last year, and I want to reiterate it. I really hope all of this stuff we talk about doesn't come off as, and you touched on in the beginning of the episode, like, it's good to pat yourself on the back. I never want it to come off as like arrogant, or I don't think it's holier than thou or anything like that, but just arrogant or like self-serving or this and that. But I do, like you said, it's very important to be proud of the work you've done, but never let that make you think that your work is better than somebody else's, regardless of your opinion of someone else's work. It could be, you could hate their content, but it doesn't matter. They could be more popular than, shit like that happens all the time. And I think that's super important to keep in mind, because it's just because you're proud of your own work doesn't mean, and even for like, I don't know, I try to just take that mentality in where I'm kind of a quiet person. Like I don't interact with a lot of people. I'm bad at interaction, like on Discord and shit like that. I'm more of the type like if you reach out to me, I'll have a conversation with you. But I'm never the person to reach out first because I'm always like I'm inconveniencing them. Like I don't know what they have going on. I don't want to bother them. It's none of my business. I feel guilty about it. So I don't know. I don't even know where the fuck I'm going with this. I think the point I'm trying to make though is just like, um, I like these conversations because it feels like pod shop. You know, we're talking shop, and I feel like I'm hoping it's for listeners. If I hope you find it as interesting as we do, where this is really the only time of the year we get to chat about the inner workings of what it's like to be a podcaster. Like you can kind of hear what our thoughts and our hopes and dreams and all that other stuff, like what we are feeling as we're going into the new year, what we're feeling as we make our content, and just kind of the work that goes into it. And and I think one of the other reasons it's just a nice way to kind of wrap up the year for me. You know, like it feels nice to look like the way I take a critical look at video games when I cover them for the show. It's kind of like this for the end of the year. I'm taking a critical look at my year and really looking at what I could do better, what I did well in, what I could do better, and what I want for the future. And I think what I want to talk about next real quick, and I know it's kind of weird to throw it to myself to talk about like my favorite episodes, and I think
I
I'll
was
tie
going
it
to
in.
anyway. So
Oh, there we go. Great minds think alike, I guess. I want to talk about my favorite episode, what I could do better at, and just kind of like an overview with that. So like to start off with a negative and then move and end off with a positive because I'm a positive person at heart. So why end it on a downer? Um, I think in general, I know you've said I'm good at interviewing. In general, I actually I think interviewing is one of my weaker points. And I'm not saying that to be humble. When I was listening to my episodes this year, there was a lots of moments I caught myself while recording sometimes not fully paying attention to my guest, zoning out a little bit too much. And I'm thankful when I was listening back to the episodes, I'm good enough at bullshitting that I was able to make it seem coherent. But there's a lot of times when I'm listening, I'm like in the middle of recording an episode, I'm like, oh, I wasn't paying attention nearly enough to what they were saying right there. And that's not good, to put it mildly, for especially for an interview. I'm thankful that I'm able to pay attention for the most part for over the majority of the episode, but there's chunks of episodes and interviews I caught myself just not really being up to a standard that I find acceptable for myself, you know? So it's something I want to work on in the next year as I get more interviews for the show. I don't even have any interviews lined up just yet for next year, but as I inevitably get some interviews for the show, I want to work on that. That's something I really think I can get better at. Now, in terms of things that I was really happy about, one, the Still Bonding podcast. You were talking before how the tapes of trepidation uh makes you really happy. Still bonding is that for me. For those, I've shouted it out during the Patreon plugs in the back at the end of the episode. But still bonding is a chance for me to talk about my love of the James Bond movies. I mean, you all know, listeners of the show know I'm a huge James Bond fan. TJ, you know I'm a huge James Bond fan. I love those movies so much, but it never really fits with the format of my show. So I started Still Bonding as an excuse to do it. And I didn't want to run a whole nother podcast. I don't have the time to. Like, I don't have the time to devote socials to a different podcast, to devote like time to a different feed and making sure I'm giving each equal attention. So I figured this would be cool Patreon content for my patrons for the $5 level. And the reason it's up that high is because these episodes are 3 hours long. I'm chatting with my co-host Erica for usually 3.5 to 4 hours. After and about three of it is recorded, and after editing, we still cut out like 15 to 20 minutes. But like it's a lot of work to do those. But I'm having so much fucking fun doing those episodes. Like the same level of enjoyment I feel when I get to critically break down a game, I'm getting from critically breaking down James Bond, both in all of its amazing stuff and all of its incredibly problematic things. The still bonding stuff has been an immense amount of fun. It's I love doing it, and it's been great. And also the bonus episodes of the show. That's actually something else I want to work on more of. My bonus episodes are 15 to 20 minutes, and that's for I do them twice a month. So in total, patrons, at least at the $5 level, get three things every month: two bonus episodes and like a 3 hour long, a 2.5 to 3 hour long James Bonding or still bonding episode. And I'm just so proud of that because that's a lot of extra work that I do for my patrons. And not just, I don't do it just because I mean, I'm doing it for them because I want to show them how much that means to me. Like they're acknowledging the effort that I put into it. So I want to put more effort in and do something back. So I've been really enjoying the Patreon content, and that's not a plug, I swear. There's and specifically my favorite episode of the year. I'm going to tie this in now to what my favorite episode of the year is. Very proud of the Patreon content. I'm even more proud of the Final Fantasy Draft. That episode, I remember when we were talking at our last year's retrospective that I wanted to do like a scripted narrative drama kind of. That did not happen this year. There was a couple chances for it to happen. I just never really took the dive just yet. And I will. That is a goal still. I still want to do that at some point. I just have to find the time and the effort, more the effort. Let's be real. But one of my other goals was I wanted to do the Final Fantasy Draft, and I had tried doing that back in 2021, and it was a big concept where basically if you take fantasy sports where you're drafting players from a league and trying to create the best team out of players from all these different actual NFL teams or whatever fantasy sport you're doing. I think NFL is an easier comparison, just because it's usually the most popular. But what if you combine that with video games? And so what I did was I took Final Fantasy and all of its zaniness, all of its characters, all of its plot twists, all of that stuff, and I combined it with fantasy sports. So players or the contestants or whatever you want to call them, if they would draft individual elements of Final Fantasy. So like in NFL, you draft, one or two quarterbacks, you draft one or two running backs, you draft three wide receivers, you draft specific positions. In lieu of positions, it's elements of Final Fantasy. So main character, one of your four party members, soundtrack would be another element. Setting slash world would be another element. What's your graphic style like? Do you want 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit? Do you want what story beat, like what plot twist do you want? What's your final boss in your ideal Final Fantasy game? And since it's a draft, if someone picks somebody off the draft board, then no one else can draft them. So if someone wants Cloud from Final Fantasy VII as one of their main character, as one of their four party members, no one else gets Cloud. He's off the table. So it creates this competition amongst all the different contestants. And the reason I'm so proud of that is I invited a guest I've had on the show before, Game Dave. He's actually, I shouldn't even say guest. I consider him at least a friend of the show at the very least. Like him and I have met outside of the podcast, like in person. That's been kind of cool. He's collaborated with me a number of times, and I love having him on the show. Game Dave was on it. My friend Chris Copleen from Retro Hangover, which him and I have become great. Actually, one of my favorite networking elements. I usually shy away from talking about networking because depending on who you know in the community, that could seem like bragging. Like, oh, you just name dropped all these people. I don't mean it that way, but and no offense to Chris, by the way, this makes it sound like Chris isn't a big name, but in terms of networking, getting to know Chris this year has been one of my favorite things. I've loved guesting on his show and having him on my show. He was on my show twice this year, both for the Final Fantasy Draft and for what was it? Russian Attack, an NES game. Rush in Attack. That was a fun one to do. I'm amazed we got an hour out of that game because that game is short as hell, and we somehow were able to squeeze an hour and 10, hour 15 out of it. Anyway, but so Chris Copleen from Retro Hangover was on it. He was a first time guest at the time. And then Nadia Oxford from the Acts of the Blood God RPG podcast. She's one of the biggest figures. Like, she's part of one of the most popular gaming podcasts in the network, in like gaming podcasts, I guess. And then Try from My Life in Gaming, one of my favorite YouTube channels, and had these four amazing people all drafting their optimal Final Fantasy game. And I just sat back in awe. I just got to sit down. I guided the conversation. I steered them through the draft, but I got to sit back and just watch these like experts in their field, in the field of Final Fantasy, duke it out. And it was just such an amazing time. I want to do another one. The other reason it's my favorite is also it took a lot of work to do, because it was four people from actually most of us were all in the same time zone, now that I think about it. Actually, all of us were in the same time zone. So that actually kind of worked out. But people have, kids and different lives, and trying to organize four guests, five if you count me, all at the same time, and trying to get it all done. What ended up being like a nearly 3 hour long episode. I think it was like 2.5 by the end of it, or it was over 2 hours. I don't remember how long it was exactly. Favorite moment of the year by far. Favorite episode. I was just so happy with how it turned out. And when I mentioned before, like what this year has meant to me because I got the most feedback ever, that episode was it. And not just from the people who were on it, but like I had former guests on the show, like, retweeted and quote tweeted out saying this episode's fantastic. Like, there's so many good things here. I had someone email me out of the blue. I don't even know if they're a listener to the show. I don't know if they still listen, but they asked for the Google Doc that I had the rules for the Final Fantasy fantasy draft, and I sent it to them so that way them and their friends could do their own Final Fantasy fantasy draft. It was just such a cool experience for me, and that episode has meant the world to me. And all the episodes this year I really enjoyed, but that one just sticks out just because it was the most fun to pull together. I legit I remember in the middle of the recording session, I took a video of in Zencaster of the bars being recorded, not even like a video on my phone. Like, you can't even hear the audio. It's just me recording the screen, because I was just so happy with what was happening in the moment. I was having so much fun just listening to it all unfold in front of me. One of my favorite episodes. I hope I know I'm gushing about it a lot, but dude, it was great. It was great. So that's kind of like my lows and highs for this year. Um, TJ, I don't know if you have any lows and highs that you want to dive into for yourself, but at the very least, what is your favorite episode from this past year that you produced?
Oh man. See, here's the problem. Y'all know
Mhm.
me. I can never pick just one. So I'm going to do a quick rapid fire, real
Mhm.
quick. My chat with Jason Wilson from the Grey Rooms obviously has to
Oh,
be
yeah.
one of my favorites. My chat with Brooks Bigley, who was the host of Behind the Door, which was the Grey Rooms kind of interview podcast, which I love.
Yeah.
Big fan of
Okay.
Brooks. He's awesome. My chat with Christian from One in the Chamber, a fantastic band. We just really hit it off. I really enjoyed that chat. My chat with CJ Felony, who is a local Ontario professional wrestler who is just a badass and a great
That's
guy.
awesome.
My chat with Sarah and Mitchell from Among Legends, because it was just so much fun. And it was the first time I've done an interview in a while where for some reason I like forgot who I was or something as we were starting the interview. Like I was like, wait, how do you interview people again? Like what is this? And my wall I have behind me like fell on me and I was like freaking out. There's all this weird shit was going on. And I just there's like there was 15 minutes of that podcast, and then I had to stop. I had to go do something and come back, and they were totally cool. Like they were awesome. Big shout outs again to Sarah and Mitchell. And when I came back, I sat down and I was like, you are TJ fucking Hodder of the Hodder Show. Figure it out. And then the rest of the conversation was fantastic. And they were like, oh my God, that was like the best interview I've ever had. Blah, 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 blah. Huge shouts to them. My chat with Tim Coleman from Septum Bone. And the reason is because for the first half of that podcast, it was a full improv kind of thing because Tim's band Septum Bone, their whole thing is they're a prehistoric band who writes songs about things like fire and pointy sticks and meat being good. So they are prehistoric people. So, I was like asking him like about how it was inventing fire and like all this stuff. And just, I was able to keep it together. I have no idea how. And like there
That's
are moments in
fantastic.
that episode where if you listen really closely, you can hear Tim just like losing his shit laughing. And he was trying to keep it together, but he was like, I don't know how you kept it straight. I said, I don't know either. But we were going to do it for like 5 minutes in the beginning and then be like, okay, jokes aside. But we kept going for a full half hour and then we listened to a song and then came back and acted like nothing happened. So it was like, all right, Tim, so tell me about the single, man. And he was like, yeah, man. So anyway, was before he was kind of like unga bunga, like kind of being, we like wheel, good, fire. Like it was just ridiculous. My bachelor party podcast, I mean, I kind of have to shout that out, right? That's just, it was the reason why it was so fun. I mentioned this earlier, real quick. The reason why that was so fun was because here's what my bachelor party consisted of, Josh. I showed up, cracked a beer. We set up a table with podcast equipment that my best man, Garrett, shout out to Garrett, rented so that I could have like a full setup and didn't have to bring my own.
Mm-hmm.
I sat down at that chair and recorded with my father-in-law and brother-in-law and Garrett, which was the first 15 minutes or so of that podcast. Great conversation. I'm so glad I caught that audio. And then basically for about 5 hours, those microphones didn't stop running. And on that episode, you guys heard bits and pieces of that night. There is about probably 4 hours of content that is never, ever going to see the light of day.
I can only imagine some of the shit that was said.
And there is also this thing that I am going to release at some point on Patreon. I'm just waiting for the opportune moment, which is basically myself and my buddy Brandon doing like a radio call-in show, but it was all improv.
Okay.
With myself and my friends. And it is about an hour of just the most ridiculous, absurd, and obscene shit you ever heard. But it's just too much fun. So that was a blast, obviously. The family-friendly Halloween special, which is me narrating Halloween stories that were for kids. I've never done anything like that, so it was a big step outside my comfort zone. But the reason, aside from the fact that it was a lot of fun, there's two main reasons why I really, really loved this episode. And honestly, it's because of two things of feedback I got. One of which was that if someone I know said that she actually played it for her kids. And I was like, bro, like that's awesome.
That's so cool.
And I was like, did they like it? They were like, yeah, they actually really were really into it. And I was like, bro, like they like, oh, there's sound effects. Like they really dug it. So I was like, that's cool. And then one of my friends said that I kind of had sounded like David Cummings from the No Sleep podcast, which is like the biggest fucking. And I was like, he's like, you didn't sound like him, but like you kind of gave me that vibe. And I was like, bro, like that means the world. I had the first time ever on the Hodder show, there was a full audio drama podcast that was a crossover with my friends at Baseline Feed called A Cold Wind Blows on Halloween Night, which is a story I wrote last year. And it was a full audio drama production. And it was the first time we've ever attempted anything like that. It was the first time someone did guest sound design and production on the Hodder show. That wasn't me.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal. Big shout out to Tanner. That was a blast. Shout out to everyone who was involved with that. The last two I have to shout out. I did a conversation very recently with my buddy Brandon Bowden from Bowden Voice, which was a blast getting to chat with him again. He's my old producer and everything as well. It had been like 4 years since he had been on the show. So it was really good getting him back on. It was just awesome. He was involved with the Hodders getting hitched podcast, but this
Yeah.
was different, obviously, getting to chat with him. It's also, I think, the best sounding podcast I've ever done.
Well, he was a producer, of course. Well,
Right.
still is.
Yes, exactly. And a full-time professional voiceover person. I mean, come on. And then, of course, last but not least, what I have to shout out, it was literally like 6 years in the making, but I finally had my man Jason Reese from Jay Bridges Alerts on the podcast. And that, I think that's probably my favorite conversation I had for the year, just because the ground we covered, his story, the positivity just rolled into a nice ball. I didn't edit a damn thing off that podcast. I pressed record, introduced him, and we talked, and it was amazing.
That's great, man.
I can sit here all night talking about a bunch, but yeah, I think that's probably the most special one of the year. Just that, and then the bachelor party. I mean, yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
those are some for me, folks. It's just yeah. As far as lows, honestly, the only thing I personally want to work on, there's two things. One of which is my scheduling. I need to get this figured out. I've had a lot of changes in my personal life with work. So it's really, really hard to schedule interviews right now. And it's making it very tricky to do an interview podcast when I can't schedule interviews. So,
I feel like low key having a consistent schedule. I'm not talking about podcast schedule. I'm talking about a personal schedule. Having a consistent personal schedule is low key like in the top 3 of most important things that you need to handle for being a podcaster. One of the reasons I mentioned it before that I'm very lucky with my current schedule. It's because my daughter goes to sleep at the same time every night, and I generally have 3 to 5 hours every single night, depending on how tired I am. If I'm feeling pretty awake and chipper, I'll get a full 5 hours. I can stay up past midnight, but I usually try not to do that because I have to wake up at 6:40. But I'm very lucky in that aspect because I'm almost always have availability. If I need to record while my kid is awake, I talk to my wife, see if it's feasible, see if she's okay if I do that. I try to do it as seldom as possible, for her sake and for the kid's sake. But like, it's very lucky. So like I can only imagine how difficult it is for you when you don't have a consistent schedule. So it's like, well, this week I could record these times this week, but it's going to be completely different the next week. And it's going to be completely different the week after that. Versus me, every single night, the same time, I'm free every single night. The only times that I might not be are Tuesdays and Saturdays because I usually stream on Twitch. But if it's for a show, it's for a recording session, actually tonight is a Saturday night, I skip the stream because the podcast is what I enjoy most. I like streaming on Twitch, but I like doing this the most. So it's very lucky. I'm very lucky in that aspect. I feel like that's an underrated an underspoken about aspect of podcasting, of your own personal schedule. It affects so much of your production. It's insane.
It absolutely does. And that's the boat I'm in, where it's like, I really want to get that figured out a little bit heading into the year. And then the other thing really is just continue to improve everything that I do, continue to improve the questions I ask, continue to improve my active listening, which is super important for interviewing. Yeah, that's really pretty much it, man. I think that it's important to have this conversation and to look back on this year in this way. And I always have fun doing it, but I think it is now time, as we start to get ready to cross the finish line here, to talk about maybe let's really give ourselves that pat on the back. Let's look at our top 10 most downloaded episodes of the year.
I think that is a good way. I'm not going to go into specific download numbers, but I will. But because I feel like that's a little too much.
This episode did this many downloads.
I know, right? Because then it feels like a dick measuring contest, and we don't need that shit.
Listen, no.
You just hear a thump in the background.
It's more like a
ding,
ding. Wait. It's more like a That's the best I can do. Sorry, guys. I forgot that wasn't a glass cup. Anyway,
Uh,
Josh, take it away.
my top. Well, are we doing top 5 or top 10? What did we say?
I
think
said
top
top
5.
10, but you can do top 5 if you want.
Well,
I'm indecisive as fuck. That's why I always do 10 of everything.
all right, we'll do top 10 real quick. My number one, actually no, we'll start from the bottom. Starting from the bottom, and then we'll get here. 1, 2,
Aha.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I just want to make sure I got it right. My number 10 for most downloaded episode. Now, I recently, Libsyn has made it a thing where they or they made it a thing where they show the IAB download statistics and then unique download statistics. IAB is like better for advertisers, and generally it just weeds out all the bots. And dude, let me tell you, about half of my unique downloads are bots. It's fucking wild.
No.
It's really demoralizing when you see it. However, on the plus side, I lose less than like I don't lose as many downloads per episode as I would think I would, which is nice to see. Anyway, so I sorted this by the IAB statistics. So this weaseled out all the bots. Because believe it or not, for example, there is an episode. I'm going to shout this one out. And I'm only going to give these download numbers for this specific episode. It's not in my top 10. It's actually like pretty far down. It's like it's like in between the 20 and 30 range for this year. So a little below half. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, it came out in like early last year, 2022. And I think it came out in February. Had 85 IAB downloads. So what advertisers consider legitimate downloads. Unique downloads was 420. I don't
That's a lot of bots.
Most of them are not that much of a difference. For some reason, that one and only that one is 420. So anyway, my actual top 10, starting at number 10, is StarCraft, which came out in I can't remember because it shows my upload date, which is almost always like a week or two before the actual release date. So either September or October. StarCraft, followed by, for number 9, Sonic the Hedgehog, followed by number 8, Crash Bandicoot, number 7, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, the only new game that I covered this year, only game from 2022 that I covered this year. Number 6 is the Sega Master System with G from G to the Next Level. That was the first episode of 2022, excuse me. And that makes me really happy to hear because the Sega Master System is an underloved system. Most people don't even know what the fuck it is. It was Sega's first system in North America specifically. It actually had earlier systems over in Japan, but I won't go into a video game history rabbit hole right here. Then number 5, Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, one of my favorite Ratchet and Clank games of all time. So happy that was a popular episode. Followed by number 4 and number 3 are very close. They are Red Dead Redemption is number 4, and Red Dead Redemption 2 is number 3. So right back to back. That's kind of crazy. Number 2 was my favorite episode of the year for the Final Fantasy Draft. And my number 1 episode was my interview with My Life in Gaming, one of my favorite YouTube channels of all time. They do fantastic work talking about the video fidelity of old video games, like taking your old Nintendo and N64s and Super Nintendos and be like, here's how to get the best possible image, like picture quality from those old consoles for both retro TVs, professional CRT TVs, the PVMs as they call them, and then modern HD televisions. It's a fantastic channel. If you have not watched their stuff, I highly recommend it. They were my most popular episode, which I'm very happy about because that was one of my favorites to do. Actually, I think it was one of my best interviews of the year. I mentioned before where interviewing is something I want to get better at. That one, I could tell I was like on, like I didn't miss a lot of beats with that one because I remember finishing that and being like, this is a good episode. So I'm glad to see it came out as my number 1. But that was my top 10. TJ, what was your top 10 episodes this year?
So for me, so I did switch over providers this year. So this may not exactly be accurate. I have to give one quick two quick shout outs to 2 episodes that I'm not going to include in my top 10. One of which was my chat with Brooks Bigley, because it did really, really well on Spotify, but I don't know how well, because I don't have a number, but Spotify said it was my most popular episode of the year. So shout outs to Brooks. It probably means it's probably more likely in my top 3. But anyway, I just want to give that a shout out. And then also my episode I released last week, which was a reading of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas that I randomly wanted to do, is one of my most popular episodes of the year on YouTube, which I don't really count for this, but just wanted to give those 2 a shout out. Starting off at number 10, I had a Hodder Music Showcase featuring Take Good Care by Among Legends, which featured Sarah and Mitchell from Among Legends.
Mm-hmm.
We had number 9, the my Bachelor Party podcast, Hodder's Getting Hitched. Number 8 was my chat with Tim Coleman from Septum Bone. Number 7 was my chat with Jason Reese from J Digital Arts. Number 6 was it was an Ask Hodder Anything, and it was the episode 6. Yeah, episode 6 of Ask Hodder Anything. I have no idea why it's on here. It definitely wasn't my best one I've ever done or anything, but anyway, we'll take it.
Don't question it.
Number 5 was my chat with Mike Penny from the Jailbirds, which was a great conversation. My chat with Gord Cameron from Beguiler was number 4. That was an episode a long time in the making as well. Number 3, which this one, all these make me happy, but this made me kind of really happy. I had 3 Halloween specials in October, and one of which was I actually took the first 6 episodes of the Tapes of Trepidation and uploaded them onto my main feed, just to kind of give people a taste. And apparently people really like it because it was my 3rd most popular episode of the year.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that was really fun for me. I really enjoyed that. Number 2 was my conversation with Bryce Smith, who is the guitarist for Rivaltown, also is a pretty darn famous TikToker known as Daniel Day Puis. So big shout outs to him. He's the guy who farts on everything, folks.
Oh, God.
So yeah, big shout outs to him. And then my number 1 episode of the year, I actually have a tie. So I have to shout them both out. On Spreaker, my number 1 episode of the year was my chat with Sarah and Mitchell from Among Legends. Amazing conversation. But then given its YouTube numbers and also the numbers it still had on this, it was almost in my top 10. I feel like I have to give this a shout out for number 1, was my family-friendly Halloween stories podcast that I did.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because it did quite well. And that was a nice little surprise because I more just did it for fun. But yeah, so those are a lot of my favorite episodes are in there too. So that really made me happy and made me think I'm going in the right direction. But huge shouts to everybody who was on the show this year. I do not think I had even one slightly subpar episode this year. I think every episode fucking was great. Every guest I had on was great. But yeah, that's about all I got for that. But just big shout outs to everyone who's on the show this year.
Yeah, man, I want to reiterate that for my guests as well. Like I mentioned, actually, this is actually a little behind the scenes. We tried recording this once before, and the internet decided to be a big old doo-doo head. And this one's been going fantastic. Thankfully,
that's not what I said. I got mad.
I was actually just curious, like after you mentioned what your number 1 episode on Spotify was. For me, it was episode number 32, but it wasn't from this year. It was like my number 1 episode of the entire year was episode 32, Metal Arms Glitch in the System. Sorry, I know that was complete non sequitur to what I was just talking about, but
that's okay. I figured it would be. I know you've talked about that episode before.
It's just so weird that one keeps doing really popular.
That's my episode 18, bro.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned
my episode, my Lane Staley tribute. It wasn't even in my top 10 this year. I was so happy about that.
That's wild.
It's been in my top 3 the last 6 years.
But no, sincerely, for my guests this year, I had like I was saying, we tried recording this once before. It kind of fell off because of the internet, but I had over 30 first-time guests on the show this year, which is a record for me, and that's amazing. I can't believe A, this is a little bit of a pat on the back, but that I was able to organize that. But B, that so many people were willing to take the chance. Like it means a lot to me, especially when there's guests on the show who I consider to be much more important than me and like who have a much larger impact on the gaming community and the community I'm a part of. And the fact that they were willing to take some time just to shoot the shit and talk about a game or talk or get interviewed by me, it meant the world to me. I think the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap this all up is just some quick statistics as to where my podcast was listened to. um the number one place for my show is the United States. That's not surprising considering I am from the US. But number two is, and I'm basing this off those IAB statistics. I'm not using the unique ones because, it even tells me like which, like, do they listen to it via Spotify? Do they listen to it via Apple Podcasts? When I was looking at it, for example, Chrome on the unique had over 5,000 downloads alone. Chrome on here has 586. So it took out like 4,500 downloads just between unique and IAB. It's just wild. Anyway, United States, number one. United Kingdom, number two. Australia, number three. And TJ, I'm disappointed in you. Canada's number four, bringing up the rear.
That's bullshit. I'm going to
know,
change that right now.
you Canadian legend, you should you need to
download every single episode once.
I know, right? Then followed by, I mean, this isn't really a country, is it? It's Singapore. That's a city, isn't it? Isn't Singapore a city?
I have no idea. You're asking the wrong person, but I'm going to Google it.
I'm going to Google it as well. No, it's a country. Oh my God.
Singapore's
I feel
a country.
So
yeah, man.
stupid.
Come on.
I feel so
Figure
stupid.
it out.
Oh, it's a republic. Okay.
That's probably really sensitive. Whatever. I don't know.
I feel so. I hope I didn't offend it. To my Singaporean listeners, I apologize. Singapore is on the tip of Malaysia, and I
thought it was part of Malaysia. I don't know. I don't know nothing either. It's okay. We're dumb.
That's why. Okay. Followed by Sweden, then Germany, then the Philippines, then Indonesia, then Japan. Shout out. And there's like 7 more pages of this, but I'm not going to read all those because then it's like, it's, just, a couple here, a couple there. Though there was 7 from the Russian Federation. So how about that? 7 downloads all over in Russia this year. Go figure, right? The lowest ones, it just 1 download in United Arab Emirates, Jamaica, Croatia, Egypt. Like there's a bunch of little 1 download things. It's kind of funny. In terms of where people listen or how people listen to it, Apple Podcasts is the number 1, followed by Spotify, followed by Apple Core Media. I don't know what the difference between Apple Core Media and Apple Podcasts are. I wonder if it's I don't know. Maybe Apple Core Media is like the I know it's not called iTunes anymore, but like the iTunes app on your like desktop or something. Maybe
that would make sense.
I don't know. Followed by Chrome, then Overcast. I don't know what the fuck GSA is. Castbox, excuse me, Podcast Addict, and then iTunes. So Apple just makes up a shitload there. You have iTunes, Apple Core Media, and Apple Podcasts all over the goddamn place. And then the last one on here is Pocket Cast. So shout out to all of you, like especially the top 10 in the countries. Like that's wild that in the top 10 I have Japan, Indonesia, and Philippines. It's kind of cool.
Absolutely. And like, I guess just to follow up with that too, for me, looking at countries, this is kind of hilarious because again, switching over all that fun stuff, it might look a little different if I put everything together, but just for Spreaker, no surprises. Canada was number 1.
Of course.
Not by as much as I thought though. Only by a couple hundred downloads. I was surprised. United States bringing up the rear.
Oh, man.
I pretty much know who I can thank for that. Big shouts to one of my patrons, Eric, and then also my friend Rebecca, who I know the two of them are. I know that they downloaded, especially big shouts to Rebecca, because I know she downloaded every single episode of the show and started at episode 1 and is actually listening through because she'll message me about stuff. And I'm
That's
like, are you
wild.
actually listening through every episode? She's like,
I
yeah,
am
of course I am.
terrified if someone does that to my
I
show.
know, dude. I was like, please don't do that. She's
There's
like, I'm
some
going
shit
to. I'm like,
episodes in
please
those old
don't.
ones.
Please don't. United States number 2. India is number 3, which I feel like it would be Australia if I put all my things together. But yeah, India number 3, Australia number 4, Italy is number 5. And then shout outs to Barbados, Germany, Philippines, United Arab Emirates that all have 2. And then shouts to Brazil, South Korea, France, Mexico, and Peru, who each have 1.
All right.
And then I guess for sources, shouts to Spotify being my number 1, Podcast Republic bringing in the rear, Apple Podcasts, Geo Savan, which I know is the podcast app in India, Spreaker, VLS, and then a bunch of other stuff. Shout outs to Amazon.com, which apparently you can listen to podcasts on Amazon.com, not Amazon Music, which is also
That's
in
interesting.
there. Generic Android app is on there as well. Chrome, Audible has 2, and Deezer has 1. That's depressing. Anyway. And also, for the record, real quick, folks, thank you to everybody, because in the last 2 months of the show, I have had the best time for actual download numbers I have all year. So thank you. And thank you, Josh, because I appreciate the hell out of your support and your friendship. And this is always just too much fun, man. I always appreciate that you want to do this with me, and I always have a blast doing it.
Thank you, man. And I'm grateful for everything this year. I when I say that I hope the listeners like this, I genuinely mean that, because I don't.
I thought you would say I genuinely don't care. I like listening back to these more of like a milestone thing too. Yeah.
Like it's a lot of fun, and it's just, I don't know, it's something different to kind of like, I feel like it's a nice bookend and beginning to like bookend for the year, and also I guess it's a bookend, I guess. So it begins the next year and ends the previous year all within one episode. And it's just kind of nice. It's like that nice like starting point. Like it's a definitive cut in between the 2 years to kind of separate the two. And I don't know, I just like that. But no, I love doing this with you too, man, because like I've said before, like you were one of the first people to ever. I've been talking all episode about this. About just getting validation. You were one of the first podcasts to reach out to me back when you were part of Two Guys in a Game, and we connected through that. And you were one of the first podcasts to reach out to me and give me compliments about my show. And I'm not great with, actually, you know what? I mentioned before something I need to work on. I need to start giving out compliments to other podcasts that I like specifically the indie ones, because I don't listen to enough of them. So here, I'm going to make that mental note right now. I need to start doing that more in 2023. But, but it meant a lot to me back then that you reached out and we kind of talked a little bit, because you were a gaming podcast. I am a gaming podcast, and getting to know you. I mean, dude, how many 5, 6? We've known each other for like
something
5 years
like that.
now.
2017, I think, was when we
yeah, it's been 5 years. That's wild, insane. Man. Like we've known each other for 5 years. Have never met in person yet, but we've known each other for 5 years, and it's just kind of nuts that we still stay in touch, like even outside of these year-end retrospectives. And it means the world to me that you enjoy doing this, and it's a fun bookend for me as well. And to you listeners, like, thank you. I said it last year, and I want to say it again this year. I don't know how to thank you enough. And I don't know how to thank you in a way. Like one of the reasons I repeat myself so much in this episode is because I am desperately trying to find the right words to show my sincerity about how much people like you listeners mean to me. Because I don't want it to come off as like when I was talking about Patreon before, I didn't want it to come off as this money thing. When I was talking about the comments, I didn't want it to guilt trip anyone into reaching out to me to say like, oh, I like your show or blah blah blah. But and it's in my mind, maybe it's my anxiety, I don't fucking know, but I have a hard time saying it and making my own sincere feelings come across in the words that I'm saying. And I don't know if I'll ever truly be able to do that to what I want to say. Like, so when I listen back to it, I can feel in my words how I actually truly feel on the inside. So I'll just kind of leave it at this before I continue to blabber on and repeat the same goddamn shit all over again. Um, Thank you so much for this past year, everybody. And I'm sure, and like TJ, I know you feel the same way about your listeners to this show, and like Hodder Show listeners. I hope you enjoyed this episode just as much as I did recording it with TJ. But seriously, everyone, thank you so much for this past year. It's been the best year of my show. Not just the download numbers actually haven't gone up that much, and that's not me complaining. I've had the most fun I've ever had in this podcast this past year. That's all because listeners are because of the listeners. It really is all because of the listeners. So I'm so thankful for this past year. I'm so excited for 2023 because I got some cool stuff lined up next year. I already have. Actually, I mentioned before, I don't know if I have an interview lined up. That's a lie. I just remembered I reached out to somebody. They said yes, and we're working on scheduling. So there will be an interview sometime either in January or February, depending on what all works out. But I have so many cool things I'm excited to share with you. So you just wait for 2023. It's going to be a good fucking year. Yeah, I don't got anything else to say. TJ, do you have any final words? I already gave mine.
Shabubi. No, I'm kidding. My sentiments exactly, man. Just thank you so much to everybody. Thank you to you, Josh. I appreciate the hell out of your friendship, man. And 2022 has been an amazing year. I'm sure 2023 is going to be an even better year. And around this time in 2023, we'll be having the same conversation, and I'm sure we'll hopefully have the same sentiments, unless we get to talk sometime between then. I'm still waiting for an invite for that Aiden Chronicles episode, but whenever it happens, man, whenever it happens, whatever, or I'll just have you on my show for something. I'll make up a reason. I don't need a reason to have you on. I'll just like my buddy Josh.
Your show is a lot more freewheeling than mine. Mine is very rigid, and
we can get away with it.
But no, I was one thing I will say that I'm sad that I didn't put you through for this episode this year. I didn't make you watch a shitty video game cartoon for the holiday.
We got to do that. We got to. I feel like I could come on for a Captain N episode if for some reason
dude, yes,
come on
100%.
Yeah, I would do that in a heartbeat. You send
right
me an episode, right, I will watch it.
I'm having you on for a Captain N episode.
Just give me like a couple weeks heads up. I'm in, man. Let's do it.
Yeah, so I think now, perfect time. Let's do our shout outs, do our plugs, do all that shenanigans that we do. And I mean, not necessarily, I'm going to be very brief with my own today. Follow me, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StillLoadingPod on all of them. Please consider giving it a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcasting app you use, because it helps more people find the show. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I like feeling warm and fuzzy. It's a good deal for all parties involved. And finally, if you do want to support the show monetarily and get Still Bonding and those bonus episodes that I mentioned before, for $1 a month, you get all the episodes a couple days early at better audio quality. $4 a month is the bonus episodes. $5 a month is Still Bonding. Patreon.com/StillLoadingPod. That's all I got. And of course, most importantly, this is not anything for myself. The Bit by Bit Foundation. The Bit by Bit Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to put video games and video game consoles in the hands of kids receiving inpatient care at hospitals. So if you want to support them, if you want to support them, go to bitbybitfoundation.org and consider donating. That's it. That's my plugs. That's my spiel. I normally go a little bit more long-winded on normal episodes, but since we kind of talked about it so much, I figured we got it covered. TJ, social media, plugs, what do you got?
If you want to follow me at The Hodder Show, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Hodder Show. If you would like to help support the podcast, consider leaving a rating or review on the podcatcher of your choice, whether it's a Spotify or Apple or Castbox or Podcast Republic. However, I appreciate it very much. If you would like to support the show a little further, consider joining the Hodder Show Patreon. Anything above $5 a month will get you access to the Taped of Trepidation Horror Narration podcast. And a bunch of other fun things as well are waiting for you over there at the Patreon, patreon.com/The Hodder Show. If you are a user of Discord and you are not on the Hodder Show Discord, you are missing out. Come on, hang out. And if you're a patron, you also have access to exclusive stuff on there as well. I do live things like I'm going to do literally when we're done here. And we just have a blast. So come check out the Hodder Show Discord and the Hodder Show Patreon. I appreciate all the support, guys. Thank you so very much. It means the world to me. I'll have a shout out to all my patrons at the end of the Hodder Show version of this. So stay tuned for that. Thanks, everybody.
So yeah, thank you all for listening. TJ, thank you for joining me for this
Always,
episode.
brother.
And I will see you all next time.